Good, Vach Shvua Tov. We are on Chaf Zayin Amud Beis 27b1, and yesterday we discussed the fact that water and salt cannot be bought with the money of Meiser Sheni. Again, Meiser Sheni is one of the tithes, and a person has to take this money and bring it to Yerushalayim and buy food there. Now, you have to buy substantial food. We'll talk about what type of food you could buy in a little more detail today. No Eruvin discussion. The Gemara ultimately said that salt and water cannot be purchased, but the Gemara did say that if there is oil mixed together with water and salt, you are allowed to buy it. And the Gemara said, what's the novelty? That's such an obvious thing. You're allowed to buy oil, so of course you can buy oil and water and salt. What the Gemara says is that, like this, let's say it costs $10 to buy oil, okay? And you go ahead and it costs $11 to buy oil mixed with water and salt. You'd be allowed to spend $11 of Meiser Sheni money, even though we know for a fact one of those dollars is being added because of the added water and salt, but because it's being done behavla, it's all mixed together, it's all one purchase, and it's all one item, it's all one entity, therefore you're allowed to spend Meiser Sheni money on it, even though had it been two separate things, had it been $10 for oil and $1 for the water and salt, you would not be allowed to do it. But now that it's one entity, behavla, the two mixed together, inclusion, the principle of inclusion, you would be allowed to do so. So the Gemara now questions and clarifies this concept of havla. Ask the Gemara, uvavla mishar, are you allowed to pay for Meiser Sheni using this principle of inclusion? The Gemara says, yes, you can. That Tanya was taught in a brayso, Ben Bagbag Omer. Okay, Ben Bagbag is one of the Tanaim, very famous statements in Pirkei Avos, which is made famous by a famous song. So Ben Bagbag Omer Babakar. The pasuk in regards to buying things with Meiser Sheni says Babakar for cattle. You can use the money for cattle. Melamich Lochim Bakar Agav Oro. That means you're allowed to buy cattle, even though when you buy cattle, if you go to the store, you go to the market, and you buy a cow. So you buy the cow. Now, part of the cow could be eaten. Part of the cow is worthless, the bones, you throw those out. But part of the cow actually has value, the skin, the hides. Now, you can't eat the hides. So you may have thought that I have to go ahead, take those hides, sell them, and buy more food with those hides because they have a value. The Gemara is saying, no, Babakar teaches you you're allowed to buy the cattle and get the hides, even though the hides will not be eaten. You can go ahead, you can take them, you can make parts, you can make a bag out of them, you can make clothing out of them, you can make a Sefer Torah out of them. That's yours to use. So even though normally Meiser Sheni is used to consume, Havla, the concept of inclusion, allows you to buy the cattle, even though you're only eating the meat, the skin, and the hides, you're allowed to keep for yourself. Uvatzon, the pasuk also says, and you could spend it on sheep. What does that teach me? You're allowed to buy sheep along with its wool. Uvayayin, the pasuk says you're allowed to buy wine. What does that teach me? You're allowed to buy wine together with its barrel, right? When you buy wine, you don't just buy the wine itself, it comes with a barrel, and you spent money on that barrel. The barrel costs money. So you're allowed to go ahead and keep that barrel. Now you finish the wine, great. You go ahead and keep your coin collection in it, whatever. Uva shechar, old wine. What does old wine teach me? You're allowed to buy something called, temed, you're allowed to buy something called temed. Temed, once it ferments, what that is a mix of water and wine. Now again, as we spoke about earlier, water is not something, you cannot use Meiser Sheni money to buy water, but water mixed with wine, making something called temed, you are allowed to use Meiser Sheni money, even though part of the thing you're paying for, right, if it would just be wine, you'd spend, whatever, again, $10. Now that it's mixed with water, it's $10.50, right? So nonetheless, you're allowed to do so because it's one entity, and all those are examples of havla. Now the Gemara is going to analyze this limud, this entire teaching that we have from all those extra words. So says Rav Yochanan, anyone who could explain to me the need for the word babakar for cattle, according to this interpretation of Ben Bagbag, movilna mane abasrele beimasusa, I will carry his clothing to the bathhouse after him. Well, what does that mean? What that means is it's a way of showing deference, right? That basically people had servants back in the day, and the servants would walk behind his or her master carrying their clothing. So Rav Yochanan says, if someone could explain to me the meaning of cattle, I will walk after him to the bathhouse carrying his clothing. In other words, I'd love to see someone who could do this. I'd be so incredibly blown away, okay? My timer. What's the reason that he has this difficulty? Kulu tzrichi, because Rav Yochanan says every word in that pasuk is needed, levar mi bakar lo tzarich, except for the word for cattle, which doesn't have any need. And we're going to explain. My tzricha. Okay, what is their necessity? So he's going to interpret the pasuk in two directions. He's going to begin in the beginning, and then he's going to begin backwards, okay? Had the pasuk just said for cattle, havamina bakar hudim is dabin al gabe oro. I would think that you're allowed to buy cattle because it's purchased with its hide. It's one thing. It is one entity. It's part of its body, right? When if I say your physical body, that includes your skin. You don't skin a person, right? Well, don't do that anyway. But the point is that it's one entity, it's one thing, okay? But when it comes to sheep and its wool, that's not one entity. Granted, it's attached, but it's not one entity like skin is. So I would think that maybe sheep with its wool, maybe there, no, you'd have to shear the wool, you'd have to sell the wool. You couldn't be able to use Meiser Sheni money on the sheep, okay? But now it does say sheep. If it would just say sheep, tell us it could be purchased with its wool, because you'd say, okay, it's attached. But wine with its barrel, it's not attached. Maybe that you would not be able to buy wine with its barrel, or if you would buy wine with its barrel, you then have to go and sell the barrel and use the money to go buy more food to eat in Yerushalayim. Okay, because Rachman Abayayin, and the pasuk only said with wine, because the barrel preserves the wine. So granted, it's not attached, and granted, it's not an integral part, but it's needed to hold the wine together. But temed, which has fermented, which is essentially water with the acidity of grapes, I would say you would not be able to do so. In other words, it's really a separate thing mixed into the wine. Kaz Rahman HaShechar teach me that I'm allowed to buy temed as well. Okay, but now he's going to go in the opposite direction. Because Rahman HaShechar, had the Torah only written that last word, shechar, okay, having a my shechar, I would have thought, what is included in that? Devela ki'ilis deferahu. I would have thought, had it just had that word, I would have thought it's coming to include pressed figs from a place called ki'ila, essentially fruits which are you can make into wine, right? Nowadays people sell like pomegranate wine and different types of wines, so that's what it would be. It would be pressed figs which are made into wine, okay? Aval, yain al-gav kankana imalo. Okay, that would be really a unique type of wine. That would be the novelty. Teach me a unique type of wine. But if it just said, but I would not think that I'm allowed to include the barrel, right? Because Rahman yain. Now that it says wine also, yain because Rahman yain al gab kankana hanon tirusa. You'd say, okay, now that it says wine also, now you know that you could have the barrel is included. Okay, but maybe sheep with its wool. Okay, maybe not. Comes along, sheep, to tell me that even with its wool. Now, once you're going in that direction, and I say sheep with its wool, do I have any thought in a million years that I would not think, if I'm allowed to use my Meiser Sheni money to buy sheep and the wool, and I could keep the wool, right? I don't have to resell it, to use it for food, I have to, so then certainly the hide, certainly the skin, I'm able to keep as well. So ask the Gemara, says Rabbi Yochanan, therefore, babakar lamali. Why do I need the word babakar? What is cattle teaching me? Once I know I'm allowed to have a sheep and its wool, of course I'm allowed to have, of course I know that there's no need. What is the word babakar teaching me? Once I could have wool, for sure I could have hide. So now he foreshadows or deflects a possible question. If you want to tell me that had the Torah not said for cattle, if I just had the word sheep, I would say, okay, sheep, yes. It's not talking about the sheep and its wool, it's talking about the sheep and its hide. So oro, and therefore it also teaches me bakar to teach me no. Bakar teaching me oro, and then sheep would come to include wool. Maybe that's why it has to say both, because had it just said sheep and not cattle, I would say not sheep for its wool, sheep for its hide. And I would never know wool. And therefore I need to have both, bakar for the hide, and then tson, sheep for the wool, and now I know everything. The Gemara says that would not be a good answer. Why? Because ilo kas rachmana bakar, had it not said bakar, lo have mina tson al gabi ora in, lo have mina tson al gabi ora in al gabi gizasa lo. Dim kein lech rachmana bakar. Dimela aitulate tson. Because really what it could have done is it just should have said, if it really just wanted to teach hide alone, it could have just said the word bakar. Bakar teaches me something which has hide. And now that it teaches sheep, which includes wool, why do you need babakar? Since you could sell sheep with its wool, bakar agav ora mibai, do I need to teach us anything about the cattle with the tide? So let me explain what this means. What this means is as follows. You're trying to say that had the Torah just said tson, had it just said sheep, I may have misinterpreted that to mean sheep for its hide, but sheep for its wool, I would not know. The Gemara says no, then just say bakar. Just say cattle. In other words, if I have to try to teach you hide, which animal should I be picking? If I want to pick an animal, teach you the halacha that I could buy with my Meiser Sheni money, something that includes hide. I could use sheep, I could use cattle. Which one would I want to use? I'd want to use cattle, because cattle just has hide. If I use sheep, it could be confusing. Because the fact that I use sheep would seem to indicate it's not just the hide, it's also the wool, right? So once I have tson, the fact that I'm picking tson, sheep specifically, is clearly teaching me more than just hide, because had I just want to teach hide, I would just say cattle. The fact that I pick sheep it's coming to teach me something which is unique about sheep. What's unique about sheep? Oh, they have wool. But if I'm including the wool, which is not an intrinsic part, but it's attached, then for sure the hide is included. And therefore, says Rabbi Yochanan, that's what Rabbi Yochanan said. If anyone can teach me what this word cattle is teaching me in the pasuk, I will carry his clothing to the bathhouse. In other words, he's saying that this word cattle is not necessary. Once I have the word tzon, I already know skin, I already know hide. I don't need to have another word babakar, and we leave it unresolved. Okay, says the Gemara. Now, if you recall yesterday, we had both Rabbi Yehuda ben Gadish and Rabbi Eliezer saying that fish could be purchased with Meiser Sheni money. This is an important thing, because God willing, Beis Mikdash will be rebuilt sometime soon. And, any Jewish event, what do we have? What's a primary, it's not matzah, it's not manishev, it's wine. It's sushi, right? Sushi. Every event has sushi. And the question is, in Meiser Sheni, by the way, there's the beautiful thing with Meiser Sheni, and that is that when you're coming to Israel, you're coming to Yerushalayim with a significant amount of money, and you have to finish it you have to eat it, you have to finish it. And so what would often happen is a person travels on their own, or maybe with some family members, but they have a huge amount of food, right? So what ends up happening is they invite, the Torah says, you invite other people to eat. So people are having these, Yerushalayim was like a party, and a beautiful party, because all these people didn't imagine, instead of having to all the poor people who didn't have anything, they'd go to Yerushalayim, they'd walk around, and be like, oh, come and join me, because people had, whether it was karbanos that they had to eat, whether it was Meiser Sheni that they had to eat, and people were always making these big festivities. It wasn't just these private little meals. So person, again, Jewish event, sushi, are you allowed to have it? Rabbi Yehuda ben Gadish and Rabbi Eliezer said, sushi, yes, right? They argued about, what about fish brine? Which, thank God, no one eats nowadays. That's not really going to be an issue. But the question, that's what they're arguing about whether or not you could have fish brine. But sushi, fish, everyone agreed. However, they argue, we're going to see some Tanaim in a moment who say fish cannot be purchased with Meiser Sheni. And the question is, where is this coming from? So Yehuda ben Gadish, Rabbi Eliezer, Darshi Ribuya Me'ute, Vani Tanai, Darshi Klali Uprati. Okay, so here we're going to come to a concept I don't think we've talked about throughout all Masechah Shabbos. And it comes up a couple of times, many times in Shas. And that is the following. Many times you'll see in the Torah gives a general principle, and then it gives a couple of examples, and then it oftentimes goes and gives a general principle again. Now, there are two ways to interpret what the Torah is trying to do in doing so. By saying something general, like everything. These are the examples. Everything, right? It does that. So what is going on over here? And there's two ways of conceptualizing this. One is riboy, miut riboy, okay, which means an inclusion, a limitation and an inclusion. Riboy, an inclusion. Miut is an exclusion, like a limitation, and then a riboy, another inclusion. V'hani t'nai, and the other way of learning it is klal uprat to klal. Generalization. Prat means specifications, and then generalization again. Okay, so let's see the example and I'll explain exactly how this works. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda ben Gadish, Rabbi Eliezer, Darshi ribuy miute. Rabbi Yehuda ben Gadish, Rabbi Eliezer understand this concept of generalization or amplification is the way they translate it, but generalization and then limitation. Meaning, the first pasuk that says what you could do with the Meiser Sheni money says, "V'nasata kesef b'chol asher ta'aveh nafshecha." It says that you should give Meiser money for all that your soul desires. So all that your soul desires means everything. Riba, that is a inclusion. It says so much. Then it says, babakar uvatzon vayan v'shechar. It says for cattle, for sheep, and for new and old wine. Okay? Miet, that's a limitation. Uvechol asher tishalcha nafshecha, chaz riba. And then it says, whatever your heart wants, that's again a riboy. That is again an amplification or an inclusion. So riba, it included. Umiet, it limited. V'riba, and it included again. V'riba hakol, and it includes everything. Okay, so what this means is as follows. When you have a general statement, it means, and it says everything, and then you have a general statement at the end and includes everything again. So what's the specification doing in the middle, or what's the limitation doing in the middle? What it's doing is it's limiting. It's saying, it doesn't mean everything, it means almost everything. That's what mi'et means. Riba says everything. Mi'et, it limits it. Riba, it includes it again, telling you, it must be really everything. But why do we say some examples in the middle? To tell you it's not really everything, it's a little bit limited. So says Gemara, my rabbi, what did it include? Rabbi called me, includes everything, all edible things, that you could use Meiser Sheni by all edible things. Umay mi'et, and what is it coming to limit? Again, it's limiting just a little bit, because really, riba, and then riba, and included, includes everything. Mi'et, it limits a little bit. What did it limit? L'Riezer mi'et sir, it restricts fish brine. brine, which is not really a food, as you and I know. Rabbi Yehuda ben Gadish means mayim umelech. According to Rabbi Yehuda ben Gadish, says no, fish brine is really a food, but water and salt, that's not a food. That we would not be allowed to purchase with Meiser Sheni, right? So really, it's all inclusive, but the miyat means that it has a little bit of a limitation, right? Because riba includes everything. It says bechol, everything you want, and then it gives a couple of examples and says everything you want. So I wanted to give a couple of examples in the middle. What it was trying to do was say it doesn't really mean everything. It's a little bit of a limitation. So the most basic limitation would be things which are really not so food-like water and salt. Okay, the Hani Tanai, Darshi Klali Uprati. However, these other Tanaim, they use the principle called Klal, general principle, prat specification. So meaning, the pasuk says you use the money for all that your soul desires. That is a general principle. Prat. And then when it gives those cattle, sheep, wine, etc., there it's specifying. What it means is like this. Sometimes I'm speaking to and I say, yeah, everyone's doing this, right? Kids do this all the time. Everyone's doing this. Okay, who's doing this, right? And then you specify. You say, this girl and that girl and this girl, right? 3 people. Oh, okay. So you don't mean everyone. Okay, but it's a way of speaking. You say, okay, everything, but it doesn't really mean everything. It's much more limited than that, right? So there, it's not that you're limiting. I shouldn't use the word limiting. It's not that you're limiting the general principle. You're explaining it, right? Over here, it's not so much that you're just putting a little bit of a limitation on when I said everything. Over here, rather I'm explaining it. That's going to be much more limited by explaining it. And therefore, the end of the pasuk, the last part of the pasuk says, for anything which your soul asks, again, that's a generalization. So klal uprat to klal, when you have the generalization, specification, and then a generalization, done elakena prat. What you do is you judge it according to the similar to the specification. In other words, now we're saying it's not that you have a little limitation, but rather there's a specification, and what the specification teaches me is that it should be like the specification. It should be similar to those examples. So it's much, much, much more limiting. Whereas according to the first opinions, they said everything. Everything. In the middle, it says not everything. Okay, so you take off a little bit. Here, it's everything, but then I specify. Specify meaning that it's going to be, this is what I'm talking about, right? So now, and then when it generalizes again, it doesn't mean just those things. In other words, like this. Had it just said everything, and then it said cattle, wine, I would think, okay, just cattle, just wine, just sheep. That's it, right? But then it generalized again. So what does it mean? It means things like cattle, sheep, and wine. So what is the common denominator? Now we're going to get into what's the common denominator between cattle, wine, and sheep. So it says the Gemara, Mahaprat Meforash, Pri Vigidule Karka, just as the things which are specified clearly are fruit that come from a fruit, meaning things which reproduce, like grapes, right? Like the wine, which reproduces, right? A vine reproduces, right? Or animals, which reproduce, right? Vigidule Karka, and it gets nourished from the ground. They eat, right? Whether it's the soil, which nourishes the vegetation, or it's animals, which eat the food from the ground. So, af kol pri me pri vigidule Karka, so too anything which comes from a fruit, meaning it's something which reproduces, like a fruit reproduces, and it gets nourished from the ground. The Tanya Idach. And the other opinion, and there's another opinion on how it learns the specifications, a little bit different. Ma'aprat meforish vlados haaretz, just as the specifications are things which all are generated from the earth. What does it mean, generated from the earth? In the 6 days of creation, how it describes the creation of animals, it says Hashem took them out of the earth. And how it described the vegetation, it comes from the earth. So afkol vlados haaretz, so too any animals which come from the earth, and so too any vegetation which comes from the earth. My benayu. What's the difference between these two last opinions? Amrabaye dagim ika benayu. The difference between them is fish. Lamad amar primi prividule karka hani dagim vidule karka ninu. According to the one who says it's something which reproduces and it gets nourished from the ground, fish are included. Okay, we'll come back to nourishing from the ground. Do fish get nourished from the ground? We'll talk about tomorrow. Lamad amar vladas arts dagim imaya ivru. But according to the one who said that it's only things which are reproduced, which are created from the ground. If you look at the story of creation, it says the fish came from the water, not from the ground, and therefore it would not be included. So right now where we're stopping, we're not finished yet, but right now where we're stopping, according to one of these opinions, fish is not going to be allowed to be. You can't buy fish with Meiser Sheni money. But according to the other opinion, who learns klal upratu klal, you could buy fish. We'll see tomorrow that both opinions who say klal upratu klal would not allow fish, and we'll see they're going to be arguing about something else, but we'll have to stop over here. Have a great day.